This special called board meeting of the Wight County School Board is now in session. Clerk will take the roll call.
Mr. Cunningham?
Present.
Mr. Wooster?
Present.
Mrs. Tynes? Present. Mr. Marsh?
Present.
And Mr. Colick?
Present.
Did you call me? Presente.
Next, we'll have a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance, led by the Vice Chair. Yes, God comes first.
All right, thanks. Do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. Yes, you'll notice we had a little change up. God comes before country. And so that's the way we will be doing it going forward. We will have the moment of silence followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I want to welcome everyone here tonight to the special called board meeting at Westside Elementary School, 800 West Main Street, Smithfield, Virginia. We are preparing our students for college, career, and life. And the subject of tonight's special meeting is the budget. So without any further ado, we will start with a request to speak. And there are no requests to speak, so we will move on to the approval of the agenda or amendments.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve the agenda as presented.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Clerk will take the vote.
Mr. Cunningham?
Yay.
Mr. Wooster?
Yay.
Mrs. Tynes?
Yay.
Mr. Marsh?
Yay.
And Mr. Colick?
Yay. And now that has passed, we're going to move directly into the presentation of the fiscal year 2024 budget, and we'll start with Dr. Kramer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good evening, Mr. Chair Colick, Vice Chair Marsh, members of the board, and members of our community. I wish to first begin by acknowledging and thanking all of those who have worked on preparing the fiscal year FY 2024 proposed operating budget. We'd like to start by recognizing our deputy superintendents. Deputy Superintendent of Operations, Dr. Chris Coleman. Thank you for leading this budget process with our finance department. Deputy Superintendent of Instruction, Mrs. Susan Getz. Thank you for working with our school leaders to identify the needs of our schools. Thank you, members of the finance department. Thank you, Mrs. Christy Peffer, for your support. Additionally, thank you, Mr. Todd Christensen, Mrs. Laura Sullivan, Mr. Eric Cooprider, Mrs. Trish Magner, Dr. Marsha Kale, Dr. Tracy Stith Johnson, Mrs. Tracy Ruitt, Mrs. Jessica Whitlow, Mrs. Lynn Briggs, Mr. Kyle Blackwell, Mr. Andrew Sullivan, Mrs. Colleen Loud, Mrs. Chelsea, and Mrs. Chelsea Mullins. And certainly thank you to all of our principals and to all of our central office leaders for your support. I ask that we give them all a well-deserved round of applause for their support with the budget. And I hope that I've not missed anyone. So Dr. Coleman, Ms. Getz, if I've missed someone, please let me know. All right, Ms. Getz, I think I'm good, right? Very good. Mr. Chair Colick and members of the board, thank you for the opportunity to present the school division's needs in the superintendent's FY24 proposed operating budget. I repeat and state emphatically that this is a proposed budget and is merely the first public discussion of the fiscal year 2024 operating budget. The Code of Virginia states that it shall be the duty of each division superintendent to prepare with the approval of the school board and to submit the governing body or bodies appropriate funds for the school division. The estimate of the amount of money deemed to be needed during the next fiscal year for the support of Virginia, and it is my obligation as the superintendent to articulate the needs of the school division as clearly as possible. After my presentation this evening, members of the superintendent's leadership team will be prepared to elaborate on any budget requests that are proposed, and they are prepared to walk you through the budget book by category as requested, again addressing any questions you might have. The Wight County Schools FY24 proposed operating budget represents the school division's plans for the activities that will take place for the next school year. The proposed operating budget provides an estimated cost to complete those activities planned for the next fiscal year. Again, an estimated cost. School board members, you are certainly aware of this fact, but I note this information for members of the community, that upon review, approval, and/or modification by the school board, a budget is submitted to the Wight Board of Supervisors for consideration. Funds are only made available once the Board of Supervisors approves the operating budget and appropriates funds. Again, because this is very important, upon review and approval or modification by the school board, a budget is submitted to the Wight Board of Supervisors for consideration. Funds are only made available once the Board of Supervisors approves the operating budget and appropriates funds. Please know that the requested proposed budget items that I will share were developed through numerous meetings with teachers, principals, central office staff. I've also had meetings with bus drivers, cafeteria workers, and instructional aides. As superintendent, I've had numerous meetings with community members, various advisory groups consisting of a student advisory group, a parent advisory group, a staff advisory group. My central office colleagues and I have also had the pleasure of having individual preliminary discussions with members of the school board regarding the resources needed to advance and meet the needs of our schools and school division. As a result of these numerous meetings and interactions with school-based and community stakeholder groups, my leadership team and I have attempted to include the recommendations and needs from all of these groups. Yet, we have made a concerted effort to develop a budget that meets the essential needs of our schools and school division while also developing a budget that is fiscally prudent and practical. I venture to say that this is not an aspirational budget. In other words, we are not asking for resources to fund projects that are on our wish list. Instead, I deem this proposed operating budget to be a very fiscally responsible budget that will meet the essential needs of our schools. I would be remiss, however, if I failed to articulate the needs of our schools and school division based upon the extensive conversations my leadership team and I have had with our students, school-based staff, central office staff, parents, and community members, and individual conversations we've had with you, again, our school board members. Although I will attempt to share our most essential needs in this presentation, I will not endeavor to share every single need. I think that through our ongoing discussions over the next few weeks, we will identify the needs and requests of the schools and the school division. And as I stated earlier, we will have additional public discussions regarding the budget in the coming weeks with both the school board members and an upcoming joint meeting with the Board of Supervisors. As we discuss the needs of our division in the proposed FY24 operating budget, I think it is important for us to remind ourselves of our school division's mission and vision statements, enabling every child to discover their gifts and talents, to ensure that each child is college, career, and life ready. Essentially, we're saying that when our students leave our schools, they should be fully prepared to pursue whatever path they choose. Additionally, the school division spent valuable time developing a well-thought-out strategic plan with multiple stakeholder groups the past few years. Those stakeholder groups included staff, students, parents, and community members. And they identified 4 broad areas: academic excellence, recruitment and retention of employees, family engagement, and organizational effectiveness and efficiency. It is my position that the needs we have identified and the request we are making will help us improve in these areas as identified by our school division's strategic plan. Now, as we look at enrollment for next year, although our enrollment for FY24 is not expected to increase, but to meet state mandates and the increased responsibilities placed on staff and schools, such will require increased level of funding from Isle of Wight County. So as I begin to share budgetary priorities, I will start with one item from the FY24 state budget. Although there may be changes from the state level, as we currently know, the FY24 state budget calls for a 5% salary raise for employees. The state offers a compensation supplement that will cover those positions that are required by SOQs. Also, the governor has proposed a 5% salary increase for FY24. Although the state only provides funding for SOQ positions, the governor is encouraging divisions to give the 5% to all employees. Not all employees within the division are SOQ funded. Most divisions carry more personnel than the state's SOQs recommend. Giving a 5% salary increase division-wide affects the budget because local revenue has to fund the increase, and this increase has to be carried over from year to year. Needless to say, I recommend that we follow the state's recommendation as it pertains to salary increases for our employees, and I think we all agree that our educators are most deserving of this raise. As I prepare to share some of our specific needs related to positions and programs, I will start with needs in the departments within the operations area. For the past 5 years, we've had to increase the operations and maintenance budget for custodial services, facility maintenance, HVAC, grounds, and fire systems. The school division proposed a flat budget last year in spite of increasing inflation cost. As you may know, the annual inflation rate for 2023 in the United States is 6.4% according to the U.S. Labor Department data published on February 14th. With inflationary increases for the contractual services over the past 2 years, we're asking for an increase to meet the growing cost of these services for our schools and school division. As it relates to transportation, we're asking for an increase for the fuel for next year. As we all know, gas prices are fluctuating at an inconsistent rate. As an example, a longest running bus route is 122 miles round trip that's consuming a quarter tank of fuel for that particular bus. We run from 5:30 a.m. to 5:30 p.m., all around the Hampton Roads area with the mileage for trips, athletic events, and shuttles. We travel a lot of ground during the week. Propane has been as high as $1.79 per gallon, diesel at a high of $5.30 per gallon. We have 69 active school buses that are currently in the fleet, which in turn, 24 of those buses have reached or exceeded its lifespan. We're looking to add back bus purchasing, leasing, the bus purchasing leasing line that wasn't added for the current FY23 budget. We're recommending that we purchase 5 buses per year to get our fleet on the proper rotation plan. By purchasing outright, we're able to save approximately $80,000 each year on interest alone. The Isle of Wight County Schools fleet service is requesting an increase for general education maintenance as well. Vehicle maintenance was decreased in FY 2017, yet during that period, parts and services have increased 19 to 22%. Starting this year, Fleet Services has instituted a preventive maintenance program to complement and enhance the VDOE 45 inspection program. This means not only are our buses going to be safer than ever before, they will also be in better condition for time of resale, which will decrease our total cost of ownership per unit. As it pertains to technology, the technology department is requesting an increase in the following areas. First, the restoration of the equipment and repair budget that was increased after the one-to-one distribution increase from the previous 9 through 12 grades only to include K through 12. The budget number actually decreased back to the previous range in FY23. It increased in FY21 and FY22. The second request is to increase to the budget to support our Chromebook initiative, which started for 3rd through 6th grades. In the previous years, this has been supported with federal ESSER funds. If we wish to keep allocating Chromebooks for these grades, the funding will need to be increased to support a yearly purchase of devices and their associated management. For human resources, we have a few requests. One is to address wellness for employees, and the other is in the area of improving efficiencies for our school division. We currently partner with Anthem for health insurance, and they offer a wellness credit to the division in order to incentivize proactive mental and physical health measures for our employees. We're asking for that match. As you can imagine, with over 800 employees, it is difficult to create a program with the credit Anthem funds alone. The specific use of these funds would be determined by a health and wellness committee that would develop after the approval of the funds in preparation for next year. We want to ensure that staff's voices are heard as we prioritize initiatives around their physical and mental well-being. And in terms of improving efficiencies in human resources, our current systems for hiring, onboarding, managing leave, and documentation of professional development is all very outdated and antiquated. The systems in place are inefficient and waste valuable time of our instructional staff, bookkeepers, administrators, and central office staff. The majority of our systems that currently address the daily operations are paper-oriented and have several single points of failure due to the lack of access to information that all stakeholders need to address daily functions within the school division. Due to the doubling of their turnover rate, the systems that once were outdated but functional are no longer functional. The systems that we are proposing using, Frontline, is a trusted software company that is used by many other school divisions that creates workflows specifically for K-12 organizations. The implementation fees and purchases of this software was able to be covered through funds available due to the offsetting of the federal ESSER funds this year. However, to keep the software, it needs to be added to the budget for next year. Adding this software negates the need to add additional support staff positions in the areas of human resources and finance and allows for effective and efficient record keeping for our school division. As I share specific needs related to instruction, I start with our special education department and the needs articulated to me by members of the special education department and by teachers and principals at the school level. There's a need for an additional social worker. The special education department is currently structured with 3 teams. Each of the 3 teams have 1 special education coordinator, 1 school psychologist, and a split social worker position that are each assigned to 3 school buildings. The current model allows for a significant amount of specialized support at the school level. However, with only 2 school social workers in the entire school division, their stretch among buildings is much greater, and therefore, the support they can offer is more limited. Also, with an additional school social worker, there is the potential to begin billing Medicaid for their services if, with the reduced caseload, they could offer and/or supervise counselors in offering group sessions. Currently, the division employs 1 board-certified behavior analyst for all 9 school buildings. Although this person supervises 5 behavior instructional aides, these IAs are working with students who have not been identified as having a disability. There is a division-wide need to provide greater support for students identified as having behavior and emotional disabilities. The registered behavior technician has a certification in behavior analysis and assists in developing behavior analysis services and practices under the direction and close supervision of a board-certified behavior analyst. The population that this position services is considered intensive support needs. Therefore, the direct services provided by this position could be reimbursed through the annual Students with Intensive Support Needs grant. With the growing social and emotional needs in our schools, we think that this position will be helpful in meeting the needs of our students. We're also requesting an educational diagnostician position. The school division currently does not employ an educational diagnostician. Instead, the task of completing educational evaluations for the purpose of special education consideration is completed by 9 individual special education teachers who receive a stipend. Although we applaud the work of these teachers for assuming the additional responsibility, it has become increasingly difficult to find teachers who are willing to take on this extra duty. Therefore, the benefit of having a single educational diagnostician is twofold, as we see it. First, the consistency of educational testing will improve with one evaluator. And second, the burden of testing is removed from the teacher position. The division currently has 2 K-3 behavior and communication support self-contained classrooms. Both classes will start the FY24 school year with 7 students. 8 would be considered capacity. This will not allow for growth in this program. We will need to add another K-3 behavior and communication support self-contained classroom within the division. These classes are currently staffed at 1 teacher and 2 instructional aides, or IAs. We currently have 1 teacher and 1 IA position that was collapsed for the 22-23 school year that we would propose to use for this class. We therefore would only need to hire 1 IA for this need. With the rezoning of neighborhoods for New Hardy Elementary, the population Hardy is expected to increase by approximately 100 students. If the current percentage, 14.5% of students with a disability, is consistently reflected in this group of students, we expect that approximately 14 students would be students with disabilities. This represents an additional caseload and the need for an additional inclusion teacher and an IA. If we were to pull a teacher and an IA from Carrollton Elementary, that would leave Carrollton with 2 teachers for a K-3 span, which we know can be difficult. Additionally, if the population continues to grow at Carrollton, we will be faced with adding additional staff there as well. As with the special education IA position at Hardy Elementary, the same need exists for a part-time speech pathologist position for Hardy as well. As it pertains to the instructional needs, after extensive conversations with our teachers and administrators, we have identified additional instructional needs and supports. We're requesting a Dean of Students position at our secondary schools. This was one of the top requests of our secondary schools, both high school principals, and it was a request by our middle school principals as well. The positions will be funded based on the teacher pay scale, but will focus on discipline and school safety. The position will work proactively and collaboratively with school resource officers, SROs, and with school security personnel to prevent issues as they work proactively to meet the needs of students, and they will process disciplinary infractions. This position will allow the school administrators to focus on instruction, student achievement, and the ongoing issue of learning loss for our students. The retaining of instructional aides, or IAs, positions were one of the major requests of our elementary schools. The 20 IA positions were funded through the federal ESSER grant for the past 2 years. Next year, there will be no grant funds to keep the positions. Again, they are the #1 request and priority for our elementary school principals. The IAs have been trained to work directly with small groups of students in early literacy and numeracy skills. They've proven to be a tremendous asset to classroom teachers. They work closely with our 1st and 2nd grade students, and they work closely with teachers to meet the growing needs of our students. We're requesting an instructional coach at Smithfield Middle School. There's currently no instructional coach at Smithfield Middle. Our coaches have proven to be instrumental in developing our new teachers by providing them with personalized side-by-side coaching and support. Many of our new teachers have not gone through a traditional teacher training program. Therefore, it is our responsibility to train and support them. In addition, instructional coaches also provide intensive coaching to underperforming teachers in our schools. This instructional coaching role will help to improve the level of instruction in our classrooms. We're asking also for an increase in school-based instructional funds to provide additional funds for schools to purchase items such as art supplies, supplies for science experiments, teacher and student consumables, etc. The majority of schools requested an increase in this area. I personally do not think it is our teachers' responsibility to purchase such items with their hard-earned dollars. Neither, in my view, is it the responsibility of our parents to purchase such items. We should be paying our own bills as a school division that relates to such classroom needs. We would add an additional Virginia Preschool Initiative classroom at Carrollton Elementary or at Hardy Elementary. We receive state funds for more slots than we are using in our current 5 Virginia Preschool Initiative programs. We currently have a wait list of eligible students for the program that is for at-risk students, and adding the program would be a great benefit to our community. And due to the growth in some of our content areas in some of our schools, and due to the extracurricular activities in our schools, we're asking for the following: an additional physical education and art teacher at Smithfield High School. Again, this need is based upon growth. The numbers dictate the need for the additional teachers. We need an assistant athletic director at Windsor High. They do not have an assistant athletic director. This person would assist in covering the numerous events at Windsor High School. The language group services for non-English speaking students have increased. Therefore, we need an increase in this area as well, again, based upon growth. We're requesting part-time elementary lunch monitor positions for all of our elementary schools. This was a major request by our elementary teachers. Currently, our elementary teachers all have lunch duty. They help get the students through the lunch line and seated at their tables, and then the teachers eat their lunch. By the time they assist their students with this process, there may not even be enough time for the teachers to use the restroom. With only a 40 to 45-minute planning period, this extra 30 minutes per day would be a huge benefit to all of our elementary teachers. Moreover, these part-time positions are very prevalent positions in many school systems, districts, and divisions. We would like to offer this professional courtesy to our Isle of Wight elementary teachers as well. This investment may help to retain our teachers and may help to attract teachers as well. Board members, you continue to hear me speak about the need to enhance and continuously improve the safety of our schools. The security assistant positions for our secondary schools would add an extra layer of safety and security to our secondary schools. They would be assigned specific duties throughout the day, such as morning arrival duties, cafeteria duty, hall duty during transition times, frequent restroom monitoring, the securing of doors, assisting with major athletic events, and they could even be assigned to some classrooms as needed. In the early grades, we still see some students who struggle with reading and math skills as a result of learning loss. In the upper grades, the reality is that many parents are not able to assist with the academic content for a variety of reasons, either due to work hours or a lack of expertise in some of the content areas. As an example, some parents may not be very helpful with trigonometry or a foreign language class that they have not taken or at least have not been exposed to in many years. Therefore, we are requesting a after-school tutoring or funds for after-school tutoring. We would hope to provide qualified teachers an opportunity to work with after-school tutoring that would provide teachers with pay for this additional responsibility and would provide students with content-level experts. Again, in my discussions with school leaders and some parents, this has been expressed as a needed area for our school division. And if we are able to provide our students with after-school tutoring and extracurricular activities, we would need to provide transportation as well. Currently, only students who stay after school are those who have parents who can transport them. This would provide all students with the benefit to stay after school for after-school activities at least a few days a week per school, regardless of family availability due to work, socioeconomic status, etc. In my many conversations with community and school division stakeholders, the Career Technical Education CTE programs are often mentioned as one of the major accomplishments of the school division. Virtually everyone I have spoken with applauds the school division for developing our very own CTE programs. Like any successful initiative, we should not rest on our laurels and or be content with the status quo. Although our division has done an amazing job of creating CTE programs that are significantly benefiting our students and our community for that fact, we are already receiving requests to grow and add additional programs. And I am receiving requests from CTE teachers about ways to support existing programs. Therefore, we will be asking for additional resources for the upkeep of the equipment, and we will need additional staff as our programs continue to grow. Additionally, one of the very few central office positions I'm recommending is a CTE coordinator position to support the current students, teachers, and programs in the following areas: writing, reporting, purchasing, and tracking for the Perkins Grant, and industry credentials, certification assessments, coordinating, expanding, and supervising work-based learning and internship opportunities and workforce development initiatives, assisting with research, development, and implementation of new CTE programs, and tracking course competencies and helping to ensure a high level of instruction and alignment with industry standards in all CTE courses. As I conclude my presentation, I strongly suggest that the request I have offered in my presentation thus far on behalf of the many voices I sit here and represent with this proposed budget would assure you that you are not just spending money, but you are investing taxpayer well-earned dollars on not just our students, staff members, and schools, but you're investing money in our community. And what do I mean by that statement? I mean that where you have great communities, where people desire to live and work, you will always find very good schools and a very good school division. Your quality of living will remain high, and your property values will continue to increase if we maintain very good schools as we work on continuous improvements. In a recent study from the Weldon Cooper Center at the University of Virginia, the state of Virginia grew by over 41,000 people in the 12 months ending July 2022. And the data sets reveal which counties grew or lost people. What's more interesting is that not only did Wight County grow, but Wight County is one of the fastest growing counties in the state with a ranking of number 8 out of the well over 100 counties in the state of Virginia. People clearly desire to live in and work in Wight County, and they desire to send their children to our schools. If that trend is to continue, board members and my dear community members, then I implore you to invest in our schools, as I'm confident, board members, you will do. There's no question, board members, that this investment comes with a cost. Our total proposed request for the FY24 operating budget is approximately $4.6 million. As you well know, board members, the vast majority of our costs are to pay for the salaries and benefits of our employees. There's not a lot of room for discretionary spending. Thus, we are required to be very prudent as we allocate funds for other needed areas. As we look at the needs we have identified and the requests we are submitting to meet those needs, you will see that the needs exist in critically important areas which are consuming the vast majority of the 24 proposed operating budget. Therefore, our requests are in those areas to meet the identified needs. The 5% raise that is recommended by the Virginia House, Senate, and the governor, our annual technology needs, our transportation needs, special education needs, career technical education CTE needs as our programs continue to grow, the instructional needs that are articulated, and the resources for safety and security to ensure that our schools are as safe as possible. We all know that the budget process is very fluid, You may ask us to remove items from the proposed budget, and/or you may ask us to place items in the budget before you, the board, take a final vote. And we are fully prepared to respond to the board's adjustments as instructed. As you look at the timeline, we have a few upcoming meetings. We have an upcoming joint meeting with the Board of Supervisors on March 2nd. We have a public hearing tentatively scheduled for March 7th. We have a budget approval potentially a budget approval tentatively at our March 9th board meeting. And the budget is due to the Board of Supervisors at the county level on March 31st. Again, all of these, some of these meetings certainly are subject to change, and we can certainly add additional work sessions as requested by the board before the board takes a final vote. Thank you, Mr. Chair Collick and members of the board. I will ask Mrs. Getz, Dr. Coleman, and our team to prepare, along with other staff members, to entertain any questions you might have regarding our FY24 proposed operating budget.
Thank you, Dr. Kramer. So I guess we'll just move right into asking questions and having some discussion. So does anybody here want to kick it off?
Mr. Chair, may I?
Mrs. Tynes?
Well, I don't have any questions because with our work session that we had with staff last week, I pretty much, they answered all of my questions. But if you would like for me to say something for the public purpose, but we're going to have some other public dates that they will find out.
Yeah, and at the
times.
end of the meeting, we'll have an opportunity for that as well.
Okay, so I really don't have any questions because staff took care of my questions last week. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. Mr. Marsh?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Before I forget, can we get this posted so that the public can see this? I have lots of questions, and my questions were also, for the most part, answered in the work session. But I feel like it's important to ask them out loud so that the folks watching can understand.
Mr. Vice Chair, if I may I want to say to the public, these were individual meetings when we say work sessions, so we met with board members one-on-one, if I may.
Correct.
Thank you, sir.
They entertained me for quite some time on my own. God bless them. I'll start with the security, because I think that's a no-brainer. We all of us agreed collectively that security was our number one priority for capital improvement. So when I look at this as an individual and I see you want 5 more security positions, I'm jumping up and down. So good, protect our kids. So my question for you folks is, do you envision these people to be law enforcement? What exactly are you thinking? Are these going to be enforcers of discipline and rules, or are they going to be another extension of an SRO?
I'm going to let Mrs. Getz answer this one as well. These individuals, I think what's different with these individuals, our SROs are law enforcement agents. They ultimately do not report to us. They work for the sheriff's office. These individuals would report to Wight County School officials, the principal, Sergeant Brinkley in his role. So they would work with us and would have a wider scope in terms of what they can do, because they would be employees of the school division and, again, not law enforcement agents.
And if I may, I'm a big advocate of this. I talked to Dr. Kramer at length several times. This is what's called an SSO, a school security officer. So there is a big difference between what law enforcement officers do and what school security officers do, like Dr. Kramer was saying. We don't expect a deputy to go checking our doors while the students are in class. We do expect our SSO to do that. We don't expect our deputies to let people in the school and check credentials. We do expect our SSOs to do that. So that's going to be the difference as we move forward. And you're going to see that there's an awful lot of school districts in Virginia that actually put this into their budget this year.
And just to add, one of the things that Mrs. Getz explained to me was, particularly in our high schools, the principals and the assistant principals spend an enormous amount of time dealing with discipline issues. So one of the ideas behind the SSOs is to alleviate some of that stress so that the principals can focus on being principals, not being hall monitors. Mr. Chair, that's all I've got, but I've got other questions.
Okay. Does anybody else? Mr. Cunningham? Okay, Mr. Worcester?
Dr. Kramer, I'm just going to kind of mirror the security issues as well. Due to scheduling conflicts, I did not get the same update, so I'm kind of behind the 8 ball here. But when you're dealing with school security, you're talking more personnel versus per se detection systems. Is that correct?
Yes, Board Member Wooster, we requested the detection system in the CIP, so the personnel requests are in my superintendent's proposed FY 24 budget. So
Okay.
These are personnel positions, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'll throw out a question. On operations and maintenance. So it looks like we're going from 10 million down to 6.6 million for the new proposed budget. How much money are we on track to spend this fiscal year on operations and maintenance?
I'm going to try to answer this question the best I can. Are you
Sure.
trying to find out how much money will we spend at the end of this year?
Correct.
All right. So,
It's a two-part question.
okay. Ooh. I don't have the budget. Based off of the budget that we have, if you're asking, we're going to have a carryover in maintenance and operations, there will not be a carryover. And if so, it's going to be very small carryover, if that's your question. If you're asking
It
me
is.
how much money is encumbered, it's one thing, but if you're asking me how much money will be spent in a carryover opportunity,
So we're going to spend the full 10 million.
we're going to spend okay, of course, remember that a lot of this money was ESSER funds. Okay,
Right.
when we start looking at 10 million, but we're gonna spend down the local funding and all other state revenue. We will, except for the actual construction grant. We will not completely spend the construction grant.
Correct.
There will
Understood.
be an approximately proposed 500,000 carryover for the construction grant.
Okay, I understand that. And with the work orders that we've got outstanding, and you know, we expect probably a few more through the year, do we have enough money within the budget to take care of everything that's outstanding, and are we going to finish everything that's outstanding on the FY23 budget?
When looking at the current work orders, yes, we do, based off of the decisions of what work orders are priority and what work orders are not priority. And we can get more into detail about that. But of course, you never know with maintenance what could occur tomorrow, what could actually be occurring right now at a school. But for our projections, yes, we will finish off maintenance. All work orders will be completed that we deem as a priority. And just to help you understand a little bit more, some things that we really want to do that some individuals may deem as a priority is not a priority for the division, the overall.
Could you give me an example?
For example, if we needed if we were looking at either crowning a field or working on HVAC for Carrollton. Working on HVAC for Carrollton is a priority. When crowning crowning the football field might have to slide off to a secondary thought.
Okay, so crowning a field would be a work order?
It would be a work order if there's, let's just take Windsor High School, for example. Windsor High School has had in the past sinkholes and different things around the drainage systems. When you're looking at trying to fill in those sinkholes and different things, that becomes a work order to get that done. This has happened over the last 5 years, maybe 6 or 7 times. And,
Okay.
Yeah, the AD can really go into detail with you about that.
Okay, so we're pretty much able to do the priority work orders, but there are some lesser priority work orders, if you will, that we're not able to get routinely.
That we're not going to be able to get to if you, once again, if you prioritize which ones are based off of life systems to keep instruction supported, to keep instruction moving forward, and which ones are based off of, let's just say, sometimes sports or different things of that nature that doesn't take a priority over instruction.
So what would be the monetary value of making sure we get everything fixed that we need? When a work order comes in, we can get it fixed.
If
Ballpark.
you're looking for now,
Ballpark.
If you're looking for, once again, I would have never known that the Windsor Georgia Tower Middle School cooling tower would have actually broken down. And that was a $280,000 spend that I couldn't account for.
Sure.
Yeah,
No, that's a unique situation.
Right. Or, the Smithfield Middle School chillers that went down. Every year we request that the Board of Supervisors gives us the additional CIP or the maintenance fund of $250,000, and normally that actually carries us throughout the year.
Yeah, what I'm kind of getting at, Dr. Coleman, is we get a ton of work orders in.
Yes, sir.
And to be able to complete all of them, what is the amount of money we need? Because some things, if we let go and we let go and let go, it all of a sudden becomes a catastrophe.
Right.
The $250,000, that's a unique situation. Right. That is going to happen from time to time.
Absolutely.
But something that's $500 here, $2,000 there, that we can fix is really what I'm talking about. Okay. So that everything is done in an orderly way as it comes in, so we don't have a ton of outstanding work orders, and we can pay for them.
Right.
So that's the bottom line I'm trying to figure out. Okay. Because we're going from, like I said, a $10 million O&M budget for the current fiscal to 6.6 or almost 6.7 $1 million. So we're dropping it down. I just want to make sure that's going to be enough money to take care of all the work orders that come in right. FY24.
Okay, I think I understand you a little bit clearer now. The drop came mostly with ESSER funds. That was the drop. It wasn't a drop in local requested funds. It was more of a drop in ESSER funds. But I understand clearly what you're saying. And what I'm going to have to do is actually go back, just look at the outstanding work orders for the remainder of the year, and in the next work session, I can bring you more of a definite answer.
Yeah, and if we can get an average for the last 3 or 4 years,
absolutely.
How much we've had to pay in O&M that we've needed, and the percentage of work orders we've gotten fixed, I think that would help tremendously. My gut says that's a little bit low, and like Dr. Kramer was saying, we want people to want to come to our schools, and it's not only the instruction we're providing, but it's also the facilities we have. That plays, what it looks like plays a big part of it. So I'm a little concerned about, that we're not putting enough money into that, and that we're not getting all of our work orders, finished in a timely manner.
Right.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Coleman.
No problem.
Does anybody have a question? Mr. Marsh.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So I'd like to talk a little bit about ESSER funds. So it's my understanding that if you look at FY23 as compared to FY24, as proposed, if you subtract the decrease of local, state, and federal, that should equate to what we received in ESSER funds. Is that a true statement? In other words, in 23, we had $43,580,000 and some change for state revenue. But in 24, we're looking at $42,251,000. That difference is roughly $1.3 million. It's my understanding that that $1.3 million is some of the ESSER funds we received. Is that true? I'm just trying to figure out, I'm trying to figure out how much money Wight County Schools received last year in ESSER funds, and how much we're going to lose. What's the difference?
Okay.
How much did we get in, how much are we not going to get in ESSER funds next year? The picture I'm trying to make is that despite the $4.6 million worth of additional requests, how much are we losing in ESSER funds? So, you know, what's the offset there?
Right.
So when we go to the Board of Supervisors, and I'm sure that a couple, 2, 3 of them are probably listening.
Absolutely.
I want to know how much of this ask was the ESSER,
Right.
if any of it.
That's a very fair question. If we don't have that number in front of us, we will get that to you. You're exactly right. I mean, a number of major initiatives we're asking for. The 20 IAs are ESSER. There's some other major initiatives that we're proposing were paid for previously by the federal grant. So you're spot on. Let's make certain to have that number, and we'll get you that information. But you're absolutely correct in terms of what the federal dollars paid for that will not be in the 24 fiscal budget.
Thank you, sir. And since we're talking about the asks, and you just keep me honest here, Dr. Coleman, on technology, there's roughly $72,000 worth of ask for FY24 that were covered last year with ESSERs. So that's $72,000. And this is based off the notes I took last week, so keep me honest here. I think the biggest one is the ask to keep the 20 IAs. So that's 645,000 there and about. So then I'll shift my question over to Mrs. Getz. And she's already answered my question. Again, this is for the people watching. So we brought in 20 IAs with ESSER funds, and the purpose of those positions was to compensate for learning loss due to COVID, right? And so those 20 IAs went to first and second grade. So prior to COVID or prior to last year, those IAs didn't exist. When we hired those 20 individuals, they knew going into it that the ESSER money would run out and they may not have a job when it was all said and done. So my argument is not that they aren't valuable positions or good employees. My argument is they were brought in to offset COVID. COVID's over, arguably. The kids in first and second grade have now moved on. They're in second, third, fourth grade. They're moving up. So in my mind, you can't argue that they're there for COVID because those kids were still in diapers. So my question is, I guess to be pointed is, how do we justify to the Board of Supervisors, if we didn't have those people before COVID, how do we justify keeping them now? What are they bringing to the table? I think I know the answer, but do we have any numerical value that says, you know what, between 3, 4, 5 years ago, the kids in first and second grade as compared to today, has that number increased in performance?
I think it's really hard to put a number on that as to what is causing the change other than the obvious, which was COVID. But I would like to respond to a few things that you did mention. So when we brought them in, yes, it was directly to help with the learning loss in grades 1 and 2. So we did train those individuals with literacy skills, math skills, to work with small groups of students. And they are doing that. And I think teachers are really feeling that they are having the impact in the classroom for those kids and seeing that with the small groups that they're working with. In some schools, they are using these IAs to work with some of the third grade classes that we are still seeing the impact of COVID and the learning loss, because those third graders, they were sent home in, March of their kindergarten year. So we're still seeing that. So we are giving buildings the flexibility to use them in other grades other than just first and second. The other thing I would like to share is first grade tends to be the year where we see, kids are learning the most as far as the skills to learn how to read. When we leave kindergarten, most of our students, according to our PALS data, they are on track. We are doing very well. First grade is when we get hit, and it's across the state of Virginia, because the number of skills, you're learning to read in first grade. And so that's where we really see our impact, where our kids maybe are not progressing as much as we would like them to. And so we have not had first grade IAs, but it has not been for lack of teachers asking. Our county, if you look at surrounding divisions, we do not employ the IAs like other divisions do. We currently have, before the COVID IAs, let me say that, before first and second grade, we had part-time kindergarten IAs in our schools. Many schools have full-time kindergarten aides, plus they have first grade and additional IAs in elementary school. So we were very lean on IAs. So I think adding them in and having them there to work with small groups of children, our principals are seeing the benefit. It was their number one ask. When we asked them, what do you need? They all, without a doubt, said, I need those IAs to stay in my building. And I think it also speaks to the quality of individuals that we've been able to hire for these positions. Some do have backgrounds in education, not all of them do, but what we've been able to train them, they are valuable people, and they want to keep them in our buildings.
If I may chime in, Mr. Vice Chair, your question is a very fair one, and technically spot on, you're accurate. But as Mrs. Getz is stating, I've spoken with the principals even directly and met with many of them one-on-one to find out what are your needs. And they, to a person, were absolutely adamant. At least our elementaries with K through 3, adamant that this is a need. And you're right, however we received them may have been through that grant, but the need is real. And the needs that we're seeing in our schools, I don't think that that's going to go away. I think I hear you regarding that many of those students have moved on, but the social and emotional needs that have been exhibited in our schools, I think are going to be with us, and unfortunately, for the foreseeable future. Again, so I can't disagree with anything you said, because technically you're correct, but we are conveying to you the needs that have been shared with us by people in our schools, not just our principals, our teachers as well. As I've met with numerous school staffs, they've shared with me that this is one of the major needs, again, principals as well as teachers.
Thanks, Doc. And to be clear, I'm not disagreeing with you. The ESSER, I'm kind of hung up on the whole funding of it, how we got it and what we're going to do with them. But I do understand the value. Like, as you well know, Ms. Getz, my son's in kindergarten, and he speaks very highly of his teacher's IA. She does a great job. Do we have any numerical value that says we're getting some bang for the buck?
It's just hard to quantify that as to what is the intervention that is causing the increase in student academic achievement. I mean, it's really hard to quantify that.
Okay.
Mrs. Tynes?
I think we can provide lots of anecdotal.
Yes.
But I follow you. And
The anecdotal part, that's the hard part. So I'll yield.
And I think just it was in direct response to learning loss that we added these positions. And so when you look at us compared to state, I mean, we're performing pretty well when we look at our PALS data and where we are with literacy. Could it be better? Yes, but it's certainly not at the bottom. We exceed the state for sure. You know, can we say it's direct? I can't, but I think it's the multitude of interventions that we've put in place. It's not just one, but we've done a number of things in our early grades to address learning loss, and I think those things are working. The IAs are just one of the piece.
Would you agree that the kids coming into K1 and 2, we can't use learning loss as a justification? Because, like I said, COVID's over. So the kids that are coming into school in K1 and 2, I mean, they really, I would argue that COVID hasn't impacted them.
And I understand that. I will say that, and what I don't know the answer, but we are seeing an increase in behavior difficulties for sure, which does impact the learning in the classroom.
Yeah, specifically, I think that when we're looking at the students who are now entering K, while those kids weren't our students at that time, they were students that would have typically been enrolled in pre-K programs or in daycare centers that provide a lot of that hidden curriculum on how to do school that they did not get because of COVID. They were at home with parent care providers who were also trying to work at the time from home. And so we're still receiving those students who didn't have that same experience prior to COVID, even outside of our public education system, but through daycare and also pre-K.
Mrs. Tynes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I wanted to say exactly what Ms. Sullivan just said it. Ms. Marsh, I understand where you're going to because you like doing numbers. But as an educator, I know that once we put something in place for instructions, it's very hard to remove that. Just say, we're not going to do that anymore. Because the IAs were placed there, yes, through the ESSER funds, and yes, it came because of COVID. But COVID is going to be with us as far as the instructional piece for many years. Isn't it just because the federal government said we're no longer going to fund the local government for these things? You're on your own. We're going to have to advocate for the funding to continue to keep the IAs in place, and including the new positions for IAs. Because if we decide, we're no longer going to get that federal funding, so we're no longer going to fund you. I know when I was on the board at the time when we made the decision that, and we were told, we had to tell them that we're hiring you, you're being hired on a federal, we'll just say per se grant, the ESSER funds. So at the end of that grant, you may not have a position. We have to tell people that. As we go before the Board of Supervisors, we need to explain to them the importance. If we want to keep our students where they are and better, we need these positions to go along with the instructional positions. And like COVID, like I said, it's going to be here with us for many years before we see that COVID is completely behind us and we have caught up. Okay, like Mrs. Sullivan said, as that those young children that should have been in their preschool program, those preschools shut down just like we shut down. We did offer some instructions. The preschools programs did not offer anything, and unless it was taught from home, the students did not get it, and I guarantee you 50% did not get anything. Okay, so it's up to us as educators to make sure, that's including the school board, to make sure that we get the instructions to the youth of Wight County. It may cost us a little bit for a few years until we get those kids back where they need to be, but I mean, it's just going to have to cost us, and we're going to have to advocate for that instructional piece. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Tynes. Mr. Cunningham, Mr. Worcester.
Well, I agree with Mrs. Sullivan and Mrs. Tynes. The IAs are needed. I mean, we're still playing catch up, and we may be playing catch up. The students may be playing catch up for years to come. We don't know, but we don't want to take a chance now. Since even though we don't have the funds from the federal funds anymore, we don't want to take a chance of, because we don't have that, take a chance of the kids not getting what they need to succeed. I mean, that's why we're here. So we need to fight for this. This is something we definitely need to fight for. That's all I have.
Thank you. Mr. Worcester.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got one question. I'm going to direct this to Ms. Getz. Dealing with the IAs, are there any IAs assigned to any of the CTE courses?
The IAs that we're talking about with ESSER are just in the elementary schools.
Okay. So right now there are no IAs with any of the CTE programs, correct?
The one in culinary, that is counted as an IA, yes.
Okay, because what I'm getting at here, I have spoken with a couple of the different CTE instructors, and one of the things that did come up in conversation would be a request for an assistant, and that would be in the event of, a medical appointment, physician's appointment, things like that, would take them out of the classroom setting. With an assistant there, the students could continue to work in a safe manner, whereas if there was no assistant, then basically the only thing they could do would be to sit in the classroom and read and study. There would be no hands-on if the actual instructor was not present. Would that be something that we could look into, putting an assistant in the CTE program? And if so, what type of funding would that require?
That's not something that I have been a part of, even hearing a request of that. I understand where you're coming from. I don't know how that would work as far as someone that would be an assistant who would be capable of overseeing the classroom in the event that the instructor isn't there, because an IA is not licensed. So that would worry me. I would want to really look into that to see if that's even feasible. I don't know. And I mean, in any classroom, even in our gen ed classroom settings, if there's, a teacher has to be absent, we have a substitute teacher, and even though they do their best, I would say it's not like having your regular teacher present. But I would have to really look into that to see if that's even feasible, Mr. Wooster. I'm not sure.
Okay. If you do look into it, could you get back with me on that? Just give me a follow-up.
Yep. Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I yield.
Okay, I've just got a couple questions, Mrs. Getz. At what grade level do we start testing the students? You mentioned PALS, and I'm not familiar with that, but is that the first kind of like scholastic test that they take, or is there one in third grade?
So PALS, we begin that in, actually pre-K, but for kindergarten, we do PALS, and that is to assess for literacy. Every division in Virginia uses that, and then we can measure ourselves and compare ourselves to other divisions across the state. That is kindergarten, first, second, third grades, we do PALS. And then in third grade is when the SOLs start.
Okay, great. And the reason I ask is just to really piggyback off what Mr. Marsh was saying. I'm not a good one with numbers, but I do understand data. And is it possible to go back and look at how our kids were doing pre-COVID, before we had IAs, and then start comparing them after COVID, while we do have IAs, and see if there's a significant difference, a difference enough that we can go and say, see, this is what we thought. Will we have the data? And I think that would be a much easier sell, because I think we probably all agree that this is a benefit. But if we see the data and it's very clear, it makes it easier to sell. And it tells us whether or not we're getting the bang for our buck, because this is, taxpayer dollars. And as of right now, from everything I've seen and everybody I've talked to in the schools, I'm a big supporter of this. But I do want to, see what the data says. So if we could look at that.
We definitely have data on PALS going back for numerous years, so I can absolutely pull it pre-COVID. However, my concern would be COVID happened, and so how do we account for that learning loss versus, I don't know if I can say the IAs made this much of a change. I can do what you are suggesting, yes. It's hard to pinpoint what intervention accounts for the.
Well, yeah. What I'm thinking, and this is not an educator, but I do know some analysis. Is before we close down the schools, the year before we close down the schools, take a year or two there, and then after we were satisfied COVID is over, probably this school year.
Probably, not last year.
No. So
we all thought last year it was a joke. The joke was on us. So this year we're really treating as our first sort of
and I think
year.
that's the right way to go. And I think if we take the data that's going to, and I know all the data is not available, and we'll probably need another year or two of data.
Probably.
But I think if we take that, would be able to, see the bang for the buck. And I'm a big one. When we're spending lots of money, I really want to be able to see, okay, this is making a difference, for our kids.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, I can absolutely pull that for you.
great. Thank you, Mrs.
And if I can add to that, even though we're going to look at the data, I think other data sets we need to look at are statewide, if not national data sets. And what we'll see is there's learning loss. So I think it's going to be really difficult to see those students before COVID and compare now that same group of students after learning loss. I think it's going to be difficult to see significant gains, and we're not unique. That's the case in all of the school divisions in our state and probably throughout our country. We'll certainly do what you're requesting, but I think it's going to be really difficult for us to make an apple comparison.
Yeah, I understand that, and maybe I didn't explain it as well as I wanted, but if it can be an ongoing thing for the next couple of years, I don't expect us to be able to say, see, this is how it's going this year. But I would say in the out years, we should be able to have some data, going back and telling the Board of Supervisors, okay, we asked for these positions, for the 2024 budget. Now it's 2026, and here's the data showing how much they helped.
So, Mr. Collick, one thing I would like to add, when we looked at our PALS data last year, it was very comparable to the pre-COVID year.
Very good.
So that's excellent.
Yes.
That's with the interventions in place, including the IAs. So really, I think we've done well compensating for that COVID learning loss with the interventions because we did not see a huge drop-off.
Right, because from what I understand, most school districts did not do very well on PALS last year.
So I can show that to you, but it was very comparable to pre-COVID, which I think speaks volumes to our staff.
Sure. Perfect. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Marsh.
All right, I'm going to lob a softball at you. This is for the people watching. For the CTE, there was an ask for 3 items. One was $50,000 to purchase equipment, furniture, etc. for patient care technician program. The other one was contract extensions for Miller Welding, Horn Culinary, Rogers Building Trades, 10 to 11 months, Brittle. And then the last one was to hire a patient care technician teacher. So it's my understanding that without these 3, there will be no CTE program for patient care technician. Is that a true statement?
That is correct.
Okay, I want to make sure everybody listening hears that. That's the softball.
No. For the patient care technician, the furniture, the teacher.
Contract extensions.
That's separate.
Separate.
Yes.
Right. Well, okay.
It's the 80,000 and the 50,000.
The 80 and the 50. Yep, that's what I got here. Okay, so let's talk about the pre-K hire. So
yes,
you shared some information with me, and so here's my beef. So last month we approved a rezoning, and we shifted some students, approximately 80 students from Carrollton over to the new Hardy.
Mm-hmm.
And when we did that, we took Carrollton's current capacity of approximately 95% down to 84%. Mm-hmm. And we freed up 3 classrooms.
Correct.
One of the reasons for doing that was because the Carrollton is maxed out, and there are kids, I forget who said it, but there's kids in classes that don't have windows because they're so cramped for space. One of the asks is to hire an additional pre-K teacher and an additional pre-K IA, and one of the options is to put them at Carrollton. Mm-hmm. And as per your email, that would add an additional 2 classrooms?
One classroom, 18 students.
So here's my beef, and Mrs. Tynes alluded to it. So once you grow, you're not going to go back. I'm confident sitting up here saying we're not going to get a new school for probably 3 years minimum, unless something significant happens. So reoccupying the space at Carrollton that we just freed up, which bought us some time, I have beef with that. It doesn't make any sense. It's like we're going right back where we started. So obviously that'll be something we'll have to discuss, but it doesn't make, it's like cutting off your nose to spite your face. We freed up some classrooms and we're going to fill them right back up next year with pre-K. And I absolutely acknowledge that there is a need and a demand for pre-K on that end of the county. But it just doesn't seem like it's the right time to grow, because once we grow, you don't go away. And I'll yield on that.
May I respond to that? Okay. So, yes, we will fill up, it looks like, free up 3 classrooms at Carrollton. We would like to use one of those classrooms for pre-K. But pre-K, the programs, sometimes we move them. That's not unusual. Sometimes we have to move them from school to school depending on where the need is. It changes over time. Years ago, when I was principal at Windsor Elementary, I had 3 pre-K programs. Today, there's 1 because the need's not there. We have 2 programs currently at Hardy. Right now, our need is between Carrollton and Hardy, probably with an edge to Carrollton right now as when I look at the wait list. If we put the program there next year, and then we started saying, well, you know what, we're filling up at Carrollton again, I could easily move that program the following year to Hardy, or even Windsor Elementary perhaps. I can move the program around, and we've done that from year to year depending on the need. I said Carrollton, but honestly, once those applications start coming in this year, and I see where am I filling, where is the need, where is the wait list, it may not be Carrollton. It could be Windsor Elementary. We just have to be flexible to know the program has to go where the need in the community is. However, I need a teacher and an IA to be able to do that, to either figure out where am I going to put the program. So I'm not set. It doesn't necessarily have to be there. And of course, if Carrollton was filling up to the point where we needed to move the program, we absolutely would move the program. But I want to say that we do receive state funding for more slots than we are currently using. So we get actual money. We get, it's approximately $8,359, that's the exact amount, not approximate, per student. Now we do have to give some back because we have a maintenance of effort cost that we have to pay into the program, but it does not exceed the amount that we receive from the state. So we are not currently using all of our slots. So that really was what brought the need. We're not using all of our slots, and we have a wait list for kids to go into the pre-K program. So it seems like a real shame not to add a program.
So what's the amount we get for student?
It's $8,359, this is as of last year, per student.
And how many students are in a class?
18.
So we're looking at 150,000.
Correct.
So we'll actually be in the green. Is that what you're telling me?
No, because that is the cost of educating a child. So yes, I understand what you're thinking, paying for a teacher and IA. And yes, some of that would be, but you're also doing the things that you would do for a classroom of kids, and they go on field trips, and there's components to that program.
So this is what makes my head want to explode when we start talking about budget.
Yes, this part's not my fault, I just want to say.
So we receive grants, ESSER grants, categorical grants, title this, title that. We get all these grants, but it's not clear where it comes in, and it's certainly not clear how it's spent. So this is an excellent example. If we do this, we're going to get somewhere in the ballpark of $150,000. Where does it come in, and where does it get spent?
Well, and I will say this is very specifically for VPI, Virginia Preschool Initiative. We can't use these funds on anything else. It is just to fund the program for these children.
Synonymous with the title grants too, right? They've got very specific.
Yes.
Some of the categorical grants, you can only use it for so much.
Correct.
Doesn't change my headache that I don't know where it's going.
I understand. It is. It's very confusing. Yes. And we have maintenance of effort, which means we have to contribute local funds in addition to receive these funds. So to receive the state funds, we also have to contribute some of our local funds as well. So it is confusing.
Okay.
Mrs. Tynes.
I have a quick question for Mrs. Getz while she's on that topic. The $150,000 that comes from the state. I know previously in the pre-K program, the families it was based on financial need as well.
Yes.
Going forward, is it going to be a continuous financial need?
Yes, that's part of the Virginia Preschool Initiative. They
Right,
are
I understand
at-risk
that.
children.
I understand that. But what if we, as a board and Wight County Schools, decide, well, we want to add some slots there for maybe families that they do not meet that financial need, because that happens constantly. And I've noticed a lot of parents will reach out to us and say, you know, my child missed it, you know, because of the financial situation.
Yes, we do have a certain percentage that we can allow to enter into the program under local criteria. I think it's 15%, but I might be slightly off here or there. It could be up to 20%.
Okay.
But we are held strictly to that.
Right.
The majority of children must meet the criteria from the state of being at risk.
Okay, I was just wondering,
Yep.
because I personally, I feel like we're discriminating, because if the child is in need and the parents, because of their economic, you know, situation, we push the child, so, well, your child cannot come to this program. And I just felt, you know, that we needed to maybe locally ourselves maybe put some funds in there if we only have so many slots a year, just say 10 slots, where we can put some of those children in that slot.
It would have to be a different program because they wouldn't be able to be mixed in with
PALS.
with VPI.
I got you.
Yes.
All right. Well, that answers that. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, I've got a question, and I'm not sure who the right person is to answer this, but under instruction, second page, it's Girls on the Run, $40,000. Okay, it's a nonprofit organization, and I understand letting them use school facilities just like we do any other organization, same criteria. But I'm confused why, you know, we're putting money out for a nonprofit organization when we don't do it for any other nonprofit. Mrs. Tynes?
Okay, Mr. Chair, thank you. The Girls on the Run started, I think, maybe the year before we shut down for COVID. I'm not positive. And the reason I would like for us to advocate for that, and I know it's a nonprofit, is because the young people that are involved in that program and the people that work with them, I have gone to some of the programs at the end. I like most of the times during the summer when they come in, and I mean, some of the things that they're doing with these young ladies, it's remarkable. And it's teaching them skills that they need, teaching them how to behave in certain situations. All of those skills, sometimes a lot of these young people are not getting at home. And when I was in my session the other day with staff, I brought up the fact that when they get to middle school, which most of them are from middle school, by the time they get to the high school, if nothing else, it has taught them how to behave as young ladies. We all sitting here, we know some of the situations we've had with some of the altercations at some of the high schools this year. And I'm not going to say some, but I do know we've had a few here on this end of the county at the high school, and basically with some of our females. Not so much with the males, but many females. We have had some major situations. So if nothing else, if we could support this program, and like I said, if it's only been in place for what, 3 years, I just say 3 years, by the time the first group of those young ladies get to graduate from Smithfield High School, we will not see some of the disciplinary needs that we see now in some of our young ladies, okay?
Yeah.
And it would combat a whole lot of that, because that's the issue, having role models to teach them how to behave.
No, I completely understand everything you said. I just, for me, using public money for that, I have a difficulty with that. I would love to be able to go out to the community to get sponsorship for that, $40,000 from the community for sponsors.
But that is,
I think Girls in the Run could easily get that.
but that was discussed too in that session, and Dr. Kramer said, he would work on that, and and we know some organizations out there in the community will probably support it, but in the meantime, it was included in the budget.
If I may, Mr. Chair, all of that 40,000 wasn't used for the nonprofit organization. Some of that cost was to pay stipends for our teachers to provide support to those students in their schools. Would imagine transportation and some other costs. So not all of it. I just wanted to be clear. Not the entire 40,000 went to the
end
nonprofit.
result was support of the Girls on a Run program. And I just, it's not something that I can go out of here and say, hey, this is a great thing to do. We're spending, taxpayer money on a nonprofit. I just, there's something inside me says that's the wrong thing to do. Would I contribute to it? Could. But would I vote to have taxpayer money go to a nonprofit organization? Probably not. It would be. It would take a lot to convince me that we should. Mr. Marsh?
Just for the sake of getting it off my chest, I participated in Girls on the Run last year with my daughter. Several of the events at the local school, and then I participated in the final event. I would not support spending taxpayers' money on doing this again. Just wouldn't support it.
Anybody else? I mean, if anybody has any comments, by all means, I'm very receptive. But that's my position. Okay. Anything else?
Mr. Chair, so this is for Dr. Coleman. I know that this is fluid, but I've got more questions than anything else. There are roughly 9 expenditure categories, correct? But we don't use them all because the Board of Supervisors take care of our debt services, and the Board of Supervisors take care of our capital maintenance fund.
Right. Now, just for clarification, with debt services, the Board of Supervisors does take care of it primarily, but the funds come to the school before, we pay those bills, but same thing.
Right. So for my own personal edification, what I'm wrapped around looking at with the proposal is I know that we've got funds. So we've got our expenditures, and then we've got different funds. We've got a general fund, a textbook fund, a food service fund, a capital maintenance fund, and a grants fund. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, and 600 series funds. How does that equate to the expenditures? In other words, of the expenditures, how many of those fall under the general fund? And if I'm putting you on the spot and you can't answer that right now, that's okay. But this is how my crazy mind is working. The categorical grants. Grants are the same way. So I know we get grants in, and they're somehow wrapped into the revenue. But where do they fall for the expenditures? And so as I flip through our budget, you know, I see we've got a textbook fund, I know what that is, and we've got a food services fund, but they're not necessarily all there. And then I've got organizational codes and object codes, source codes. Can you provide us with a key so that when I look at this the next time, I know exactly what I'm looking at?
So, Mr. Vice Chair, thank you for the question. It's a very good question. You well know that we just hired a CFO a few days ago, literally, and we will get that question to our CFO. Dr. Coleman has done a great job of supervising that area, but he is not a CFO, no offense to Dr. Coleman. So let us get those questions to our finance department and our CFO, and we'll work on getting your response if that's okay.
That's fine. And, you know, I've been beating up Dr. Coleman quite a bit over this, so that question's just to get it out there. I want the people watching to know that we're studying this, trying to figure it out. And I yield.
Ms. Tynes, do you have anything? Mr. Cunningham, Mr. Worcester? Okay, my next question. It's under Food Services Fund, where it says appropriations. And Mr. Sullivan, this might be more for you. Under service salaries, $643,948. That shows an increase of about $136,000 from the current year. Is that correct?
Can you point it out one more time for me, which area you're discussing?
Under Food Services Fund, it doesn't have a page number at the bottom.
Okay.
Okay, under appropriations, halfway down the page.
Mm-hmm.
The second line says service salaries.
Okay.
Okay, it says $643,948. And based off of my notes from last year, that's an increase of about $135,917. So, and I'm sure it might have changed a little bit over the year. So roughly $130,000 increase. So it looks like probably 2 new positions under that. Would that sound right?
I can get back to you on that.
Okay.
Yep.
The reason I'm asking is when you go down to FICA and Medicare, VRS, hospital medical, group life insurance, disability insurance, and workers' comp, if there's an additional people, they should have gone up as well.
Correct, yes.
So if you can relook at that and
Yep.
let me know, I'd appreciate this.
Absolutely.
And then, I'm not sure who this is for, but if we go down to where it says purchased services, and this might be a Dr. Coleman, I'm not sure. It's almost $1.7 million, and I'm just curious to what that entails.
Mr. Collick, I have Mr. Christensen is going to join us. He might
Okay,
give you
great.
a little bit more insight into, a little clarity into the purchase services line.
Yes, the purchase services, board chair, are going to be for Chartwells. It's the company that we contract with.
Okay, that's easy to say. Okay, for 9 schools, so that's what it cost us. I'm good with that. Okay. Mr. Marsh?
So I have an ask, Superintendent. Over the past 3 months, I've heard a common theme from various people. Discipline, it's a problem. Principals, they're tasked with dealing with discipline. We saw a proposal last month for detectors for the schools at large expense. What I don't see in here, what I would like to see added in here, is some sort of a request or a proposal for canines. We've got issues. I think canines is an affordable and quick option to nip some issues we have for security quickly. I'll just leave it at that. I think it's worth discussing. We've had a presentation. We had a gentleman come up here several months ago. I'd like to see that in there, and I'll yield.
Absolutely, sir. And just to your point, we have had discussions with a local company that could provide that service, and we'll certainly make sure that that is added. per the board's request, per your request. Absolutely.
Question on that note, do you have a plan on how are you going to integrate the K-9s into our instructional program or our daily program? Because just to include them as a line item, and we do not have a plan on how we're going to integrate them, that is a concern. You just can't bring a K-9 in a school without a plan.
Madam Chair, may I respond?
Yes.
I know you directed it to your fellow board member. We're having conversations with them. We're asking those very legitimate questions. We are looking at what that looks like in neighboring jurisdictions to ensure that we mitigate ourselves against any risk, any harm to our students and staff. So those are things that we will certainly take into consideration. Although we will add it to the budget prior to the implementation of such an initiative, we will have a presentation. We've actually spoken with entities to provide that. Because of all the other things occurring, we haven't been able to have that presentation just yet, but we'll certainly have a very thorough presentation to you, the board, prior to the implementation of such an initiative.
Thank you.
And I just want to add some of the precise information about it we'd have to talk about in a closed session. And I can talk to you offline a little bit. I've been out there several times and seen the dogs training in action. And it's very interesting, to say the least. And I think you'd really be impressed. And if you'd like to go out and see them, I'd definitely make those arrangements.
I've been around some of the K-9s. That's why I said, do you have a plan? Because I feel, okay, I know the students in Wight County Schools. We have some excellent students here.
Absolutely.
We have a few disciplinary problems, but that's anywhere and whatever, wherever you go. You have those out there with the adults in the workforce. But I focus on what other jurisdictions right here in our area, the Hampton Roads area, what they're dealing with, what we're hearing that comes out in the media daily, things that's going on even on elementary levels. We're not there.
Right.
Okay? And for us to bring in something like a K-9, I mean, even if it's to say, you know, just if we need it, fine. If there should be a situation and we need to call in the K-9s, fine. But to put it out there for the public to say, hey, it's just that bad, we need some K-9s, that's what I want to say, do we have a plan? Clarify that, because our students are not that bad, okay? I don't think they're that bad. I think we have some very good students here in Wight County Schools, okay? They're not out there. They're not wow. Our kids right now, they have not done anything that I know of major. We put all of the students across the nation out of school a few years ago. Many of those students were out there on their own. They were their own adults. Right now, we have students that come to us daily when they get off the bus. They're glad to see our administrators. They're glad to see their teachers because that's an adult in their life. But a few years ago, we put those kids out there. They didn't get those adults. They had to make their own decisions. And I think some of them, they did a remarkable job doing those things, okay, making decisions for themselves. But then we transitioned them back into our program, instructional program, expecting them to behave the way that they were behaving when they went out. But it's going to take some time to transition back there. And just like Mrs. Getz said, this is our first normal, regular school year. We're going to count this. And I'm thinking they're doing a great job. Well, I think our kids have done well.
Yeah.
Over the years. I mean, the last 3 years, I think they've done well. And it's not a major disciplinary problem here in Wight County, and I will vouch for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Tynes.
Ms. Tynes, can I add something on that? Because I think I understand exactly where you're coming from, and until I visited the facility, I probably was in your line of thinking. These dogs can be trained to detect vapes, which is our #1 issue. So it might be worth looking at.
But I'm not saying not looking at it, but I want us to have a plan. And you have a
Absolutely.
plan. And Dr. Creamer
You
just
do.
said you all were working on
Yes,
something.
you have
I
to have
just
a
don't want
plan.
to say, hey, we're going to put that line item there, but we don't have a plan for them yet, other than that we just got some canines here. Fine. But that's a plan. If that's what you want to use them for. I don't have a problem with that. I just want to make sure you had a plan and a usage for them, not just to say because someone presented their program to us, well, we're going to go for this, okay? No. We need a plan and see how we're going to utilize that and integrate that into our program. Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Mr. Worcester.
if I may just follow up on that, I just want to go on record saying that I do actually support the canines in the schools. And it's not so much an issue of, saying that we have bad students or anything of that nature. It's more of a proactive, response to it. It's a whole lot better to be proactive than reactive. And I like to equate it to the same thing as you've never had a fire in your kitchen, yet you have a fire extinguisher present. You're proactive. It's not a matter of, saying anything bad about the students. And I would love to get a tour of that facility if it can be facilitated. And I do know that there are different types of dogs which are easily approachable by the public while they're doing their job. So it's not so much invasive. It could be incorporated as a normal event. So yes, I just will go on record saying I do support that. I yield.
Mr. Wooster. Mr. Wooster.
Please, Mrs.
Mr. Chair,
Tynes.
Mr. Wooster, I just want to follow up. It's not that I'm saying anyone said the kids were bad. That's not what I'm saying. But I just asked the question, if we had some way of integrating them, involving them into our program before we put it as a line item. That's all. They answered that question and said yes, okay? And then, too, we have to be careful when we present canines in school, even whatever specialty they come in there for, because especially the older students, they're going to say, oh, they got the dogs in here today. They look at the canine, their mentality, they look at the canine as being negative, okay? I'm not going to say all students, but some students see it in a negative way because it has always been presented to them in a negative way. That's where we're going to have to do our homework as well. How are we going to present it to that population of students? What Mrs. Getz just said about just walking through the schools, which they periodically will probably do that, to look for a certain, vape, for instance. They're coming in with the vapes or whatever, any type of drug or paraphernalia that they should not have. That's fine. But if we're going to have the canines in there, we need to instruct the kids too, just like we're being instructed. This is how, this is why we're bringing them in here. We're not saying that you all are bad kids, but we're looking for some things that you all are not supposed to have at school, okay? And hopefully that will prevent them from bringing them to school and leave them at home so that canines won't find anything. That's all. I'm not saying anyone's saying the kids are bad. I'm going to always, because I know some people out there right here, I said, in Hampton Roads, not even the state, they're having some major issues. And we don't even hear about some of the issues because I guess they're ashamed to even let it out there. But what little bit we hear is what the media find out about. And they find out through public records. We have some very good students. I'm going to vouch for our students. Our students are great. And I'm going to say thank you to the parents because a lot of that have to do with the way they're raised, okay? Thank you.
Thank you. And what I'd just like to ask everybody is, in the future when we're talking about the dogs, let's not talk about the capabilities in public session. That is something more for a closed session because it is part of security, and that is one of the exempt items that I believe we can go in a closed session for. So I'd appreciate that. Is there anything else that anybody's got tonight?
That's it.
Ms. Tynes, Mr. Marsh, Mr. Cunningham, Mr. Worcester,
I would just like to thank the staff and everyone that was involved. I know Dr. Kramer and thank them himself, but I would like to thank them because this, each year, our budget is getting better and better for us, the lay people, to understand, okay? Thank you very much.
Mr. Marsh?
Just to get it to get it out there, I think, in my view, the biggest takeaway moving forward for next week when we sit down with the Board of Supervisors is to make sure that we can clearly identify what we received in ESSER. In other words, what are we losing, and compare that to the increased in ask. So if we lost somewhere in the ballpark of $4.5 million in ESSER, this year we're asking for $4.6 million is an increase. How does that compare? Is it all ESSER? And then subtract that ESSER from our total budget and then figure out the percentage rate. So I think we talked about that a little bit last week with comparing the increase asked to the overall inflation rate. So 6.5%, where are we at? So.
And Dr. Kramer, if I could get a copy of the proposed dates for the various meetings. One thing that I would like in there is after the public hearing to be able to have a board meeting, just a work session where we can discuss anything that was brought up in public, anything, at all before we vote on a final product. I think that would be very helpful. So we might need to adjust a couple of the dates a little bit, but you and I would be able to talk offline on that, and
Absolutely.
then we'll make sure that the rest of the board is available and would agree with that.
That's good. And in the past, we've always had, I noticed that timeline they had up there, they said maybe March 9th, our next meeting, and I said that will probably have to change because we normally do have those discussions, and we would have a special meeting when we approve our budget to send forward.
I would agree. Dr. Kramer, do you have any final thoughts?
I do not. Thank you all. Again, this is a very fluid process, and we will make adjustments with the upcoming meetings, special called meetings such as this one. I want to thank you all, the board members, for your engagement, for the great questions you've asked. And if there are questions that you all have, and a number of you have done this, and I greatly appreciate it, my staff and I appreciate it, get those questions to us in advance, and we will certainly work offline and get you responses to the extent we can. And I think right now, unless there's another special called meeting, our next meeting is next Thursday, is it? March 2nd, with the joint session with the Board of Supervisors.
Right. Okay, I want to thank everybody for coming out, the staff for all your hard work, everybody that is watching at home. Please send us what your thoughts are, and please, if you've got any inclination, come in and speak at our meetings and let us know how you think the budget should go, because we are your representatives. Okay, with that, this meeting is adjourned.